They sat impressively on the slipways or rode the high seas. They dominated the battlefield or looked great on paper. Whether or not they actually did anything, they deserve to be called naval legends.
Greetings, comrades, commanders, and bliats. Like communism itself, the Stalingrad-class battlecruisers looked good on paper, but were rather disappointing in real life. Nevertheless, we are proud to include them in our game. In today's episode of Naval Legends, we will dive into origins of this masterpiece of Soviet ship design, her turbulent construction, and her brutal final battle against humanity's oldest enemy.
I do not understand this hang-up that people have with paper ships supposedly being less worthy of recognition than so-called completed ships. Really, with shipbuilding, it is thought that count. Any good shipbuilder could tell you this. And also, if you think about it, all historical ships were paper ships at some point. Duh.
It was almost Great Patriotic War, and the Soviet Navy was sick of running over suspicious-looking cruisers with icebreakers. Fortunately for them, Stalin was also sick of lying about his navy size at international summits, and the solution for both their problems was obvious: build some extra-large cruisers to protect the coast. These ships were to combine the artillery and grandeur of a battleship with guns not much less accurate than those of a cruiser, as well as a cruiser's speed. Being a humble and proletariat-conscious man, Stalin wanted this remarkable class of vessels to be named after a city named after him. The engineers agreed unanimously to his plan, and Project 82, the Stalingrad class, was born. Quite surprisingly, the engineers had some trouble with the new ship's requirements. It was proving unexpectedly difficult to make artillery and grandeur of a battleship and speed and accurate guns of a cruiser go together, especially in the rather compact 20,000-ton package Stalin required. The engineers were just about to draw straws for who should tell Stalin that something would have to be sacrificed to make this work, but then June of 1941 arrived, thousands of Verabus invaded, and whole dilemma was shelved. The engineers breathed a sigh of relief. In 1943, dilemma was unshelved, this time with new stipulation added. These battlecruisers would have to escort the Soviet Union's many aircraft carriers. Over a dozen designs were suggested, and even though Stalin generously allowed the ship's size to be raised to 26,000 tons, the Ministry of Big Balance Boats could not be pleased. They begged for a reprieve, citing ridiculous things such as their overworked and underfunded building plan, the laws of physics, and the mysterious recent shortage of good engineers. But Stalin and the Navy were undaunted. Admiral Nikolai Kuznetsov, known for his remarkable ability to bring foundering warships back to the surface and remotely infuse vodka into enemy gun crews, was excited about the project, believing that the new ships would be crucial in protecting and, when necessary, towing the Soviet Union's many aircraft carriers. He wasn't perfect, however. When Stalin made the excellent suggestion that the gun caliber be raised to 305mm, Kuznetsov thought this might be a bit much and talked him out of it. Stalin may have submitted to his admiral's experience, but we at Wargaming, fortunately, did not. The haggling over design technicalities went on for several years, but eventually the Navy and Ministry of Big Balance Boats agreed on blueprint. At 38,000 tons, it was a bit large, almost twice the size as the one originally proposed, but it did have artillery and grandeur of a battleship and guns not much less accurate than those of a cruiser, so it fit the bill. The technical design for this ship took just over a year to produce, and when Stalin reviewed it in September of 1949 for final approval, he politely requested same ship, just smaller and faster. The entire negotiation process returned to square one. Vodka-related habits of some of the engineers are believed to date from this conversation.
One really has to appreciate Stalin's ship design genius. He had his flaws, of course, but everybody does have flaws. And really, in this case, Stalin was a very smart man. This design he come up with artillery and size of battleship, but high speed and accuracy and quick reload of cruiser, it is perfect. It is best of both worlds. And perhaps the real miracle here is that no other nation thought of this first.
The engineer's next feat can only be described as a miracle. In less than 3 months, they produced a new technical design, possibly fueled by their new vodka-related habits. It is now believed that this design came from simply recycling a previous one with some modules swapped around, history's best proven method for inventing new warships, and one that wargaming has proudly taken inspiration from. This design met Stalin's approval, but since it was now missing some of its AA guns to allow for bigger engines and therefore more speed, the Navy objected. "We thought this was AA support ship for carriers," they complained. "Why are we removing AA guns?" It was then that Stalin revealed his master plan. These new ships could be protected from airplanes by their own escort ships. Some of the admirals were not intelligent enough to understand the point of an AA support ship that relied on AA support from its escorts, but Stalin ignored them. In 1951, several years after the intended starting date, the final design for battlecruiser Stalingrad, the first ship of Project 82, was approved. Those engineers who had not yet succumbed to alcoholism happily handed the torch to the shipbuilders, wiped their hands of Project 82, and retired to their beach houses. In November of 1951, Stalingrad was laid down. Unfortunately, Stalingrad's slipway was in need of reconstruction itself, not to mention already occupied by an unfinished light cruiser. Unfortunate delays of construction material led to delays in ship's construction. By January of 1953, the year Stalin had hoped to see his latest namesake launched, Stalingrad was only 19% completed, and the other ships of her class were even worse off. Just like engineers 12 years prior, the shipbuilders decided to draw straws for who should tell Stalin that the ship was rather unlikely to be ready in time for celebration of the October Revolution. Fortunately for them, and tragically for the rest of the world, Stalin passed away in March of 1953, and since they did not have either the doubloons or the time to complete the remaining building stages, the Ministry of Moving Stuff Around canceled Project 82. Construction of Stalingrad and her mighty sisters came to an end. One would expect this to be the end of her story, but the greatest cruiser of her time still had a crucial part to play in the advancement of Soviet military technology. The Ministry of Moving Stuff Around decided that she should be used as a weapons testing ship, so the shipbuilders happily handed her off to the tugboat crews, and in May of 1955 she was towed to Sevastopol Bay to begin her new career.
Throughout all history, no great thing was ever achieved without sacrifice. And that is never more evident than in case of battlecruiser Stalingrad. When you think of the amount of metal and money and resources and time and manpower and vodka that went into construction of battlecruiser Stalingrad, that is sacrifice which cannot be overstated. Yeah.
The final struggle of cruiser Stalingrad was as impressive a battle as any faced by the notable warships of World War II. Due to high winds, she ran aground at southern entrance of Sevastopol Bay, and her thugs and crew were unable to refloat her. The engineers were summoned from their brief vacation for consulting, and, ever resourceful, they came up with a variety of plans for rescuing Stalingrad. First, they tried sheer Russian muscle. Cruisers Molotov and Kerch did their best to tow Stalingrad off the sandbar, but thousands of tons of stellinium armor are simply not that easy to dislodge. One ingenious plan involved using charges to blow the hulk off the sandbar, but this literally backfired when the charges instead blew holes in Stalingrad's hull. Nonplussed, the brave Soviets examined the underside of the ship and found that over 200 small projections had been left from the launching cradles, anchoring Stalingrad firmly into the sand and forcing them to redo all their calculations. We may safely assume that it was at this juncture that alcoholism reached its height among the engineers. It was also at this juncture that the Axis powers reached out from beyond the grave to delay Project 82 one more time. On October 29, 1955, the battleship Novorossiysk, previously the Italian battleship Giulio Cesare, exploded and capsized for no particular reason in Sevastopol harbor, forcing the work on dislodging Stalingrad to cease until near New Year's. The workers then spent until mid-July of 1956 repairing the significant damage that had been done to Stalingrad during the rescue attempt, and trimming off all the things that were keeping her anchored in the sand. Floats were used to raise the stern of the ship, and, with this final effort, Soviet engineering prevailed, and Stalingrad was freed from her gravelly prison, marking her victory over the elements in probably the longest battle ever fought by a warship up to that time. It took yet more work to make her seaworthy enough to be used for closed testing of the newest premium armament, anti-ship missiles, but she was well up to the challenge. After she had sustained much more damage than any German target ship could have, Stalingrad made final sacrifice for the common workers by donating herself for scrap, and has continued to circulate through the motherland in the form of beet cans and various small kitchen appliances to this day. In this manner, the legacy of the mighty Stalingrad, the greatest battlecruiser ever built, lives on.